Hey everybody, welcome to my third live stream. I have a super special guest today who I've been waiting and waiting to have on the show. You know him as Made by Jimbob, and he's been on Jay Dyer, Church of the Eternal Logos. He was recently on The Crucible. Shout out to Andrew on The Crucible, and just really excited to have him here today. So welcome, Jimbob.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So for my audience, if you are confused, like why is she doing live streams? Is she still doing the Devotional Hearts Show? Yes, I am doing both. And the reason for this is I wanted to have kind of like a interactive with my audience, kind of a live stream vibe going instead of only doing pre-recorded videos. And so those pre-recorded videos, I'm mostly interviewing clergy now and authors and people that have been in the faith for a really long time. And then I'm using the live stream to talk about current events, relationships, marriage, whatever's on my mind and whatever my guest or my guest co-host wants to talk about. So today we're going to talk about art, memes, society, objective morality. I'm really excited to get to know Jimbob and kind of understand his journey to where he is now, because I heard on The Crucible, I think I heard you talking about how you had some liberal beliefs, as did I come from the New Age and very, very liberal minded. I wasn't an activist or anything like that, but I believe feminism was a good thing. Voting for Obama was a good thing, which now, I'm not a conservative. I'm just more in the middle now. And so, can you start by telling us just how you even got into art? Were you always creative as a child? And did you study art in school? And just take us through to how you got
Sure.
to be where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, I was definitely born creative. I think I was drawing and doodling before I was um, saying things or writing for sure, just drawing and all sorts of things. And so I knew that was going to be a part of me throughout my life pretty early. And then the question is like, what do you have to say with it? Because you can get good at something, or you can have a knack or a talent for something, but then you're confronted eventually, especially as an adult, that with the question of what are you saying? Do you have anything to say? And so that took actually a while because I moved to LA. I'm from upstate, not upstate technically, the Catskill Mountains in New York. Moved to Los Angeles, did the whole LA thing, was there for like 15 years. And then I was always painting and stuff, but I started in memes, just kind of like making silly things about pop culture. I had like a viral meme about Game of Thrones, and that kind of shot some of my stuff out like massively. That was like massively viral. And that was the moment I realized, like, wow, just like a crude drawing can actually penetrate the entirety of the internet in a matter of days. And I thought that was powerful, but I still didn't know why it was useful, other than
Can you
like,
tell can you tell us what it said or what it was?
yeah,
I never saw Game of Thrones, so I
okay,
probably
yes,
won't get it, but maybe
right.
my audience will.
Well, the little girl Arya, she has a phrase that a girl has no name, so she's like this unnamed assassin and stuff, and so that was one of her kind of one-liners, and so I had her at Starbucks, and the guy's waiting to take the name down, and she says, "A girl has no name," and it wasn't even well drawn. It was like colored pencils and just like slopped together quickly, like in bed, basically, like before I went to sleep. And I
But
woke
everybody knew who it was, and
right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, she shared it. The main character shared it. Like all these, George Takai, all these famous people. Just it like by the day after I posted it on my little tiny no name account that was actually at the time mostly jewelry, because I was a metalsmith for a long time. Um, all of a sudden it was everywhere. It was just everywhere.
yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And I thought that was cool. But from my values at that time, I only thought it was cool because of like notoriety, like, oh, famous people. Oh, like very limited view of what I was trying to even do. And
Hmm.
so And then like you, I voted for Obama. I was in LA, your default sort of liberal Democrat. Definitely into new age stuff, a lot of self-help stuff, a lot of intense self caring, all of that stuff. And then I remember I drew a picture of Obama because I voted for him, and then I was like, oh, he's dropping a lot of bombs on people. So I
Mhm.
took an image of him, drew an image of him, and instead of his notorious dropping a mic, I just swapped the mic with a bomb, and that really pissed some people off because that was like at the time where it was to all of us at the time, on the left side of things, we were like, we cannot have Trump. It was like life or death. So I'd have all these people being like, it doesn't matter if he's doing bad things. You're making Obama look bad. And I realized, oh, okay. So instead of Game of Thrones, I've found smaller targets, more direct targets, right? And so I think the process of what I'm doing just naturally being looking at the world and using my discernment of what's going on, what's absurd, and putting it into some format that's digestible, it just necessarily gears you towards smaller targets, right? And so
Mhm.
that's all that really happened. And getting to smaller targets, you start to ask more fundamental questions, and that's actually what led me to more um, logic and philosophy insofar as how do I attack a problem in comic form? How do I show a silly position in comic form? And that's like once I moved here, I still wasn't fully arrived at like what am I trying to say? I just knew I had a weapon. It's like a kid finding a weapon and they don't know, they're just desperate to use it, but they're not sure on who to use it on. And so that led me to further pursuit, and then eventually, I found people who did versions of art, whether it's stand-up comedy or just commentary on the absurdity of what's going
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
And I think that's when I started really going after um, political stuff, political and cultural stuff. And where I was at the time is I abandoned the liberal Democrat ship for what I call the safety raft of libertarianism that just kind of
Mhm.
floats in the middle aimlessly, to me, in my view now, aimlessly, no real solid foundation, um, but it floats. And so you can't be demonized as the right or left because you're in the middle, and it's
Mhm.
like you're a libertarian and it's fine. So I floated there, and basically that's where my first book came out, Savage Means Volume 1, which really encapsulates the absurdity of progressivism. And that was easy to do. That's low hanging fruit now to me.
Yeah.
But at the time, I had to go through that process too. And so that my books sort of represent, pretty honestly, my own paradigm shifts, um, and so that's where it went. And so, yeah. And then I discovered people like Jay Dyer. And as far as philosophy and theology were concerned, I saw that he was asking some fundamental questions that I knew were necessary to confront, but they just never approached my mind.
So what year was this roughly when you discovered J Dyer?
Um, let's see, it's probably like 2019, maybe
Mhm.
something like
And
that.
what about Jordan Peterson? Everybody.
Jordan, just before then, he was just kind of on like the peripheral at first, and then he got propped up pretty big by the establishment. In my view, they were like, "Oh, perfect," you know, put this guy up on a stage. Um, yeah, I discovered him probably around the same time. I think around the same time as Jay. Um, that he got very popular around that time, I think.
And so I heard you say that your books are kind of like a one-time availability, like you don't republish them,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
which is a
correct.
shame. I think there's probably a lot of people that wish that you would, so we could have them.
Yeah. Yeah, people ask for volume 1 or volume 2, and then, but I really wanted to make it so like a unique thing, and then maybe I would look back and maybe consolidate the best of all 3 volumes. But I know I make so much, I could proliferate so much of this type of medium that there's always just gonna be more books, and so, the best I could do is a digital version of volume 1 some way, or again, an all-star um, curation of all
Yeah,
3 volumes or 4 volumes into one solid pack. But that's what's hard about it is, like, I'll look back and something from volume 1, couple of things for the most part I'll still agree with to some level, but then there's other things where I'm just like, "Oh, that's like I could
right.
see how that was a good take then," but I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, it's not no longer necessarily the case for me."
Yeah, I had Jamie on the show,
Mhm,
and, she was saying that too, that some of her conspiracy theory books, like, one of them, she was talking about the goddess, like the triple goddess, and
mhm,
she was like, "Oh, if I were to republish this, I would wanna take that part out." But there is
mhm.
still a lot of what she wrote about a long time ago that's still totally relevant, so.
Right.
And then are you doing custom paintings for
Yeah.
people?
Yep. Yeah, I've started that about the last year and a half, and that, luckily that's gone really well because I love to do physical form. I have one behind me. And so, because I started in physical, my work online is mostly digital. And so, if not all of it, sometimes I'll take a picture of a physical thing and post it, but being able to paint at several scales, 8x8s, 20x20s, 3 foot by 3 foot, and do really fun busy paintings or very simple paintings in the
Mhm.
form that I do. It's really rewarding to be at home and
Yeah.
actually physically get dirty and take care of an object, and then like carefully get it and ship it out, and it's somewhere. It's similar to the book. So the reason I made the books is like, yeah, that's a way I could potentially make this my job. But I keep getting deleted, and so it was like, oh, obvious, like make a book, like you have it. You, you'd have to wreck the book to delete. You can't just delete me from Instagram. So ideally, for most people, and that should every artist who's building a following who might be on the verge of being silenced, it's a great opportunity. You don't have to.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's actually it just shows you where you should put the value and put it into physical form.
Yeah. So when if somebody wanted to get a custom painting from you, do they give you, what do they say? Like, is it a portrait? Do they give you a photo and you paint something of them, or what is it?
That's more rare. I am doing that for someone in the next painting actually, but um they usually take a comic they like, and then to tweak it they'll either put themselves as the responding person and send me a photo of themselves, or they'll just take it as it is, as it's been drawn before. So it varies depending on the person, but rarely people customize the wording because they're really taking a joke that they already like,
Okay.
and then I'll just do that. Otherwise, I'm getting into some things that are a little more abstract and symbolic, so it gets me into a different um, category of painting, a different genre, and that's kind of like fun and scary at the same time because I have a very crude style that's very. It is my signature. It's almost at the
Mhm.
point where I don't have to sign my name because people will just go, "Oh, thick,
Yeah.
sloppy lines," That's him. Yeah.
And, I really love the time lapse video that you did on Instagram that showed your whole process
Mm.
of how you do your work. It was really interesting. I would love to see more of those. That was
Yeah.
really cool.
Well, I started also doing a live stream. So a lot of my live streams are just these hour and a half to 2 hour rants. Well, at the end, I'll have some people jump on maybe. But
Hmm,
I did my first live stream art where I just set up my thing in an extra camera downward, and I just hang out with people and make
oh,
a comic come to life in paint or
oh, cool.
watercolor form. And we get into all sorts of conversations. We got into like a Trinity conversation while I'm trying to finish this one thing, which is like I have like rap in the background, like, and there's an argument of the Trinity, and I'm painting. It's like the dynamic is really funny. But
So
that's
this
fun.
is on Instagram or YouTube or
No,
both?
I can't stream on Instagram, only on my art account on Instagram. But it's on YouTube, made by Jimbob.
Okay.
YouTube.
Okay. So maybe one of the mods can put that in the chat, and I think I might have it in the description. I did put some of your links in the description. But that's so cool. That's so interesting. And so you're a father, right?
Father of 3, yep. Mhm,
3.
mhm.
So do they come and paint with you, and are they
Yeah.
into art too?
Yes, they're very creative. I want to nourish, their creativity, but also sway them away from anything that's, art school related. I don't want them to suddenly, "I wanna go to art school." Try to sway them away from the culture that is modern art and get them into the, um,
Mm,
the discipline of art and,
mm.
music too, and,
Yeah.
teach them how to do things well, because
Mhm.
now it's really easy to just be like, "It's your style, honey," like, whatever, and then you never teach someone some rigorous style. It'd be like,
Right.
could you take that approach to, like, sculpting? Like, no, "Oh, no, it's just art." It's like he's missing a leg. So I do wanna teach them some technical, proficiency, which is, you can't do it without discipline. You can't do it without getting over the hump of learning and wanting to quit. I want them to experience all those things. And I think the predominant culture, at least, which I try to shield them from, actually removes children from being challenged and getting over those humps,
Mm.
and I feel like that's like one of the key elements of appreciation is that part. That's the part you look back and go, "Oh, so glad I didn't quit. I really wanted to quit." I want them to have that opportunity.
Yeah. So, one of the really cool things you were talking with David Patrick Harry about when you were interviewed by him about a year ago, I think, on Church of the Eternal Logos, and you guys had this really great conversation about boundaries and structure and society and Christianity, how it all plays in with like the feminization of society that we're seeing happening. And personally, as I mentioned, I was in the new age and I was in this kind of like goddessy culture where it was like up with the matriarchy, down with the
Mhm.
patriarchy, and just do relativism, do whatever you want. There's no such thing as objective
Totally.
morality or objective truth. So you can just create your own religion, do your own thing. We should be free. Like that's true freedom, right? To just create our own spiritual path. And so I'm really interested, as I said, in the stories, the conversion stories from that kind of relativistic thinking to now living in alignment with objective boundaries, truth, and the pursuit of truth and
Mhm.
where that leads us. And so I'd love to have you share a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the first thing to point out, which is the thing that I eventually came to, which seems very obvious to most of us at this point, is that even this claim of subjectivity requires some objectivity. So something must be objectively true to pursue and argue that something is subjective. Like you're already starting from something being the case. The most notable example of this is when he uses the all is illusion concept. Like, the statement all is illusion. Well, something must not be that for that to
Right,
be true, and
right.
therefore it's self-refuting.
Mhm,
So a lot of these kind of claims, especially growing up, you rebel, maybe you rebel late, it took me a while I was baked into nothing really matters,
mhm,
nihilism, nothing's actually true. We can't get to
mhm,
the heart of the matter of anything for a while. And that, as a man, at least, once you're confronted with any level of responsibility, you can't have responsibility and live in subjective, um, totally conventionally created reality, because
mhm,
responsibility entails that there's something that ought to be managed. There are consequences. There's a regularity, in life, in nature, in the flow of things. There are distinctions. You're someone that you're not someone else. I'm the father. I'm no one else is the father, right? So this kind of thing jolts you. At least for me, when I had my first child,
mhm,
jolts me. I call it the strainer effect, where all the nonsense that you believed and all the nonsense you participated in up to the point where you become a father and some maybe a mother in some cases, um you suddenly have to strain that stuff. You don't have to. Some people don't strain it out and their lives become horrible. But all the nonsense you don't need strains out. And it's like the eye of the needle. Like you get sharper in what matters. You also get confronted with, what am I willing to teach my child? And if you ask that question, you start to confront what you actually never believed to begin with. And for me, it was, morality is subjective and ever changing. God doesn't exist. Another one that's seemingly like a big deal if you believe in God or not. No, I just came to the realization that I never really believed that to be the case. That, I just like pretended. I was just like rejecting, you know, um, pushing down and trying to make other things divine, technology, the future, transhumanism. I was big into transhumanism, by the way,
Oh,
big
wow.
time. Yeah. So I made all these other things God, and it really wasn't. Again, I knew some of this stuff was what I didn't know to be called incoherent at the time. I knew it was lofty, and I knew it gave a nebulous protective layer, so I could never really be confronted about anything, because everything's nothing, man. I did the
Mhm.
whole drawstring pants thing too, and so um
Did you have a man bun?
yeah, I actually did at some point. I had long, very long hair at some point. Yeah. Well, like I don't need Jesus. I can be Jesus. I'll just look
Mhm.
like him, you know, the whole thing. And then, I guess, like I said, parenting, becoming a parent, things become objectively clearer to you. You suddenly realize, oh, I'm not just my brain. Like I'm something else that another person depends on. That's real. They could die. Dying's real. You start to confront all these realities, consequences of life. And then, that kind of, again, some people can just reject it. They'll be like, no, I'm going to stay young. I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to still go to my moon seances, or whatever.
And Burning Man.
Yeah, all of it. I'm going to stay young forever. I'm going to be a beacon of light, of youth for my child. And you're like, no, that's not actually what they need. They
Mhm.
need to go back to the conversation with David. They seek the structures, the bones of
Yeah.
reality, whether they're the concepts, the universals and particulars, the names of things, the true nature of things, the distinction between man and women.
Yeah.
These kinds of things is what children seek. They ask you questions constantly about it. They test it. They test whether what you're saying is true or not. And they wait for the thing to come down and go, up. I'm guiding you. Here are the roads, here are the walls. But the thing is, I realize that we as adults constantly seek that too, because we're also made in his image and we're also children. So we're looking, we're also desperately wanting the guidance of our Father. And so,
Mhm.
that's just become so apparent to me.
And then, but back to transhumanism, then we have all these people that want man to be God.
Right.
And so,
It's self-refuting though. I also realized
Mhm.
that. Have all these conversations with my mom about God. Oh, God doesn't exist. There's no evidence. All the stupid, low-level atheist takes, the silliest positions now that I look at it. But ultimately, you're just saying, I'm God. You just shorten it up, atheists. You just say, I'm God. I'm the unmovable basis, the non-dependent absolute that determines what is and isn't possible in the world, in the
Right.
reality. I am it. Or science is, empiricism is. And it's so easy to go to that route. But really, once you take the biblical approach, you really do see a very clear distinction. And Jay does a great job at this. He can really pull back with just a couple of questions what the fundamental starting point of any given worldview is. And it really
Right.
isn't much different. Like you think a worldview is like every single person has their own individual worldview. No, yeah, maybe like the things they hang on the wall, like different versions of sage, but when it comes down to it, no, the answers, the roads you can take as far as what your conclusions are and what your starting presuppositions are, when it's clear to you that there's only a couple, and then you don't really see a difference. It's, to me, it's really sharp. It's like you either worship the world, which includes man or man's creation, all worldliness, or you worship the creator. And you have
Okay.
to determine who that is.
Oh, this is perfect. I was gonna tell you, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who believes there's a creator and the created, understands the difference, and believes that the creator is responsible for everything that's been created, but this person doesn't like using the word God and rejects the Bible because of historical things that you can look at to say like, well, this story in the Bible was really about this older,
Right.
much older thing that happened like way, 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 way long time ago. And I don't want to get into the whole like ancient
Right.
alien conversation, but
Right.
so how would you like what would you say to someone like that?
Well, they're making an absolute claim and just making some sort of attempted apprehension of God and who God is not. So they're being like, I think, what is it, apophatic? Like they're saying
Mhm,
God isn't something else. So to do that, you need a basis for God. And even if you don't call God, you're still presupposing a being. So I would simply take them down a basic, calm line of reasoning of just who is God. Just ask them outright. How do you know who God is? Is God one? And then you could push them into whether they're going to either go in the direction of oneness, that all is God, including the diaper I just changed. My son, messy diaper, must be God also, from that view. Flour, God, whatever. Bacteria, God. Some people actually argue that.
mhm,
And
yeah,
so anything sentient, anything that moves, is all one God. But the oneness eventually you can refute because you couldn't possibly discern God from allness, all of oneness. So there's no perspective to
mhm,
say you can't appeal outside of oneness to determine oneness. It's solipsistic. It'd be like, we're all the
yeah,
same. How do you verify that? You can't. We're all the same. Well, then you can't come to the conclusion that we're all one mind because you'd need to be you'd need not one mind to determine all mind. Similar
mhm,
problem with singularity or, simulation theory, you know, or alternate universe. Someone's when they come out in the next couple of years and they say, we've discovered another universe. Well, if you discovered it with the laws that we have in this universe. So you just necessitated whatever you claim to discover is now this universe. It can't be, not this if we're pulling it in
mhm,
here. So these problems of like, appealing outside and needing something that ultimately exists independent of what we're calling a thing, right?
mhm,
The tree is also not the rock. So the people, and I don't know if she claims this, but that's just one step to take is go, who is God? Are we all God? Right. And if she says, yeah, we're all God. And then I have this funny meme where it's like one person says, we're all God. And the other person says, I disagree. Just who's God?
then who is God?
Who's God?
Yeah.
And so that oneness has a problem, it's like
It was
monistic.
such a huge part of my because I was one of those people who drank a lot of ayahuasca, and so in these experiences with this ayahuasca demon telling you that there's only one like, we're all one, and we're all just consciousness experiencing itself, and, I mean, it's so cringy to admit that this was my worldview, and I just didn't know. I mean, I just surrounded myself with other it was an echo chamber of perennialism and, relativism.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's very convincing also. The combination of age and openness, we're all be open, everything's
Mhm,
open. Like if you take that down to the end point, you have to also include Christianity. You have to be open that none of that's true, actually. None of the elves are true. So, but it is convincing because you're basing everything on direct experience. I had an experience. And again,
mhm. Yeah,
Christianity might have a problem with that if it's only experience, because you then have to verify experience and pair it with scripture. So you need an
mhm,
outside source that's not you to tell you whether, it doesn't determine whether it's a demon or not, but it tells you whether it's consistent, right,
mhm,
with the previous doctrine, right? That's something that holds steady regardless of your experience. But it's really LSD and all that stuff is very appealing to that mindset that's generally, present with the 20s to 30 to 35-year-olds who are especially in a culture that doesn't plant their feet in the ground, right? That just kind of floating and we're everything, man. And especially if you see something that's convincing, the problem with that stuff is I always ask, well, l- I'm I don't actually believe this, but let's grant you that you talk to some access to all-knowing God intelligence, but it's not actual being, but it's this thing. It's all well. If you can only get that truth by altering your brain, then how could you logically argue about that when you're not on it?
Right.
So in other words, you have to escape it, and then you're in the reality, and you're at Starbucks, and you're like, "Oh, you gotta try ayahuasca. I met God's elf, friend," and you're like, "Well," but you're not. You have no. If accessing it and knowing the truth of the matter requires the alteration of the brain,
Mhm.
it throws the whole thing into unknowables because you have to alter your brain, but then the unaltered brain is now in question if the altered brain is the source. It's a big problem with any sort of drugs like that.
Yeah.
Whereas if prayer, even some form that you could maybe include some sort of meditation in a Christian way, expressing it or whatever, even that is you're not letting any alternative thing affect you, in any way. You're not influencing it. You're just, concentrating or whatever it is. At least that's more um reasonable,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
come to some sort of conclusions.
And it's just so interesting how in those new agey circles, any book you could read any spiritual book, any from any spiritual tradition except for the Bible. The Bible is the
Hmm.
one, and I'm sure there are people who will say, "Oh, well, I read the Bible too," but
Hmm.
not in my experience. None of the people that I was friends with had a Bible on their bookshelf. If they
Oh,
did, it was from when they were kids and they just left it there, but they didn't read it, and it wasn't in any of the metaphysical stores that I went to, and nobody talked about scripture. So 2 years ago when I somehow started reading the Bible, that's how my entire life changed from,
yeah,
and I never went back to
yeah,
to the old ways.
right. It's interesting though, because you wonder like how much, I remember reading the Bible as a kid, and there's just some things that you don't have the life experience to interpret in a way that's meaningful in a wide range, in a very impactful way, in the way it relates to being a human being in this temporal existence. And there's little stories that can teach basic like morals and stuff to children, but I always thought that was that's why it was so necessary that as you grow, even if you depart and you go elsewhere, you're still gaining some reference point, right? So oh, I'm meditating and holding a handleless teacup with two hands, and we're working on the connectedness of the alien mind right now, and it comes with a pamphlet or whatever. You start to see that there's no one really religiously neutral. You start to realize that everyone is. I watched it's like a couple of years ago. It was like Gwyneth Paltrow is like this goop concept where it's so obvious that these new age movements are still seeking God. They're just calling
Mhm.
something else divine.
Right.
And I realized through my past that you can call anything divine. The eternal universe, the AI, universal immaterial AI that is the universal mind. And you've been in these circles where it's like whatever you're calling the thing, that's why the person you're talking to doesn't like the name. It's like a meme. I remember I saw a meme that was of a fish in like a big frame of water, not an actual contained water, but like the ocean. And it was a illustration, and the fish was named religion, and the water surrounding it was named spirituality. And I remember a time where that would have like totally clicked with me. It would have made complete sense to me. Where I've been like, yeah, that's so true.
Mhm.
Like religion, the fish, it just isolates it and contains it and limits it, and but the water is everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, but then again, back to the conversation with David, what are the structures? What are the
Mhm.
foundations? How are you determining your metaphysics and your philosophy? What is the good in the endless water that is spirituality?
Yeah.
All things? Is every fish attack good in that water? Uh,
Mhm.
dolphin, having its way with another. It's like it's basically saying everything is spirituality then.
Mhm.
But I remember at the time where that sounded better to me, and I really think that leads you to a Christian worldview once you confront that you're just avoiding the consequences internally of your behaviors, or you just don't want to be responsible. Because if it's hard, and if the truth, like scripture, cuts through bone, right, and marrow and fascia, if it's that sharp, people avoid narrowness. It's vague. If you're vague, just like politics, if you're vague about it and you don't really draw the line anywhere, you can't really be
Mm.
ridiculed. But when you say something true and it's sharp,
Mhm.
you get beat up for it. You get killed. And so the sharpness of truth is what people avoid in that world of spirituality, because then they're friends with everyone. But it's tricky because the experience of all inclusivity and friends with everyone in the temporal world actually occurs as the right thing, right? Because we get along with everybody. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, no, gays marrying, whatever. This is all one
Mhm.
world, man. And so you can see from that view why that occurs as good is because their mind is in a temporal state. Their whole philosophy is seek experience, do no harm, don't tell people what to do and not to do, so long as it doesn't hurt people, right? As long as it doesn't, you don't take my stuff, this kind of stuff. And then, but oh man, once you're a father, in my view, you see those things no longer apply,
Mhm.
because
But
there's
and then there's also this tolerance toward everybody, but not Christians. I mean, when I was in that world, I was tolerant to I mean, I wasn't like I didn't bash Christians. I just thought they were lower IQ and like, "Oh, those poor people, they don't realize how oppressed they are." And so it was more like that kind of thing. But I um I do remember when I used to be on Facebook, there was so much antagonism, even in some very secular type of groups I was in, like women entrepreneur groups and stuff like that. There were these liberal, new agey, witchy kind of people that were selling. This is a real thing. They were business coaches who would teach you how to like channel to be better business people, or like do your tarot cards to show you how to plan out your business, and then like channel these spirits and guides
mantra.
and things.
uh, we can call them mantrapreneurs or something like
Entrepreneurs,
that.
that's good. And then if a Christian person said something, just even not attacking them at all, just saying like, "Well, what about praying?" or like scripture, I don't know, they would mention anything about Christianity. These entrepreneur people would go crazy on these Christian people. "Why are
Aggressive.
you
Yeah.
you're yeah, and why are you on my thread talking," just like angry, 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 when the Christian person wasn't being offensive at all. They were just maybe suggesting, I don't know, saying what they do. Like if the
Yeah.
question was, I know there was like a question like, who here uses tarot cards to plan their business strategy? And of course, they wanted all the entrepreneur people to say, I do, I use this deck, I use this deck. And if a Christian person said, I pray if I seek help from God for my business, but I don't use tarot cards, they would just rip them apart.
They're like Bibles are free. No, 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 no. Bibles are free. They're like selling the tarot cards. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, that's consistent everywhere else. I find it so absurd, some of the focus, but it's not absurd because to me, if it's true, it makes sense that Christianity in particular is isolated. Not to say that it's the only religion that gets highlighted as far as like diminishing it or making fun of it or whatever. But there is this like deep focus sometimes. And you know, you can actually see a glimpse of the heart when you mention like a scripture to someone. You see how they respond,
Yeah.
right, to it. And that's a part of scripture in itself. It's like, you know, that when you say something that is sharp and is true, you watch the response and you see where someone is. You can't judge their heart, but you see where their heart is a little bit. And it's interesting because like I always make fun of like Richard Dawkins and that whole community of people, and it's just so funny to me that the common you know, especially about Christianity, is like you know, that's no God, your God's no different than a unicorn monster. And you're like, isn't that interesting? You wrote 5 volumes of books, but you didn't include the unicorn monster. Like if it's equal, why are you so focused on Christ? Why are you so focused on Christianity if it's equal? It's like there no, it's always it's general God, but then a deep focus on Christianity. And that's where it all goes. Even when like Sam Harris, he'll do his Muslims, and then but he'll ultimately go to Christianity. And you know, I think that it's not a valid argument necessarily, but my intuition says we resist what's true. Even people who are Christian at times will resist what's true, and it's almost a good barometer. It's not always the case, but again, when you're over the a target, people start to scramble like ants, you know, when the foot's above them. And I think that's true for humans. And when something resonates, resonance doesn't mean it's true, but if it's true and it resonates, people start to get a little squirrely about things. And I see that consistently. But it's, you know, but then again, there's a disproportionate um, focus on particularly Christianity and particularly Christ, you know. And I think I thought about this, and I thought about how people, you know, there are a number of reasons one could attempt to reject Christ and the entirety of the story of Christianity as it continues to unfold. But I think one element, and again, this is a little bit of psychologizing, but I think there might be an element of man that, though we're vulnerable to worshiping the creation and man, other men as idols, that there might be this feeling that, well, Christ was a man, so it might be idolatry, or Christ was a man, and I also don't want to listen to another man. It's like this. It's back to I'm the man, I decide, and I can't, you know, get behind that a man is also of God or fully God or any variation. And so I always try to dig in a little bit just internally. I don't really go after people about it. But it's really interesting to me to look at like what are the types of angles that someone might be responding to, um, such that it makes sense to them to wholesale reject not just Christ, but a tripartite, a 3-part God. And it's interesting because a lot of people will get to the point where they just like your friend. Well, no, God exists, but to me, he's like a unknowable AI, you know, fairy, you know, or something, you know. And again, because it's uncomfortable, because you have to keep going with the inquiry. You have to get, you know, if you're going to be satisfied, you almost have to keep digging. But again, it's sometimes comfortable to stay in a vague enough but sturdy enough position. I believe in God. You atheist, but then you're like, who's God? And you're like, it doesn't matter. I know exists, and that's enough. And then there's these levels of this, right? Where you don't get clear on who God is. Some people, God's not knowable at all. But then you're like, yeah, but he's on my team, you know, God, right? And so I think we all deal with this at different times in our life, and I think we all have different trajectories on getting to the core of the answer. And at the same time, I don't think the answer is found out through psychology, philosophy, logic, essays. I think it's a personal pursuit to know God, and
Yeah,
then you have to actually accept when you've been given the answer.
absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you if you follow Jonathan Pageau at all.
Yes, yeah, I've watched a bunch of his stuff.
And Do you have any?
Um, he's kind of a little more rigorous path. I would say his path, at least how he relays it, is a bit more narrow than his friend Jordan Peterson. But it's still very symbolically driven. Like I
Mhm,
like the takes, but I've seen him in different contexts answering different questions, and you know, not to like take a punch, but it's like it like caters to the person answering, so it's like how do you say, a safer response to some
okay.
questions.
Mhm,
But generally the the fullness of relaying, particularly symbols and trends and customs and how they relate to other symbols and how these symbols are constant, or how some of the archetypes or characters or manifestations of these symbols as people or beings or demons or angels have a constant. And so I like that part of it. Similar how I forgot what it's called in orthodoxy, where you reference some of the truth percolations of other religions that are true over time, even before Christ. And
mhm,
some atheists would take that as an argument against there's these concepts preceded.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
actually not really a good argument from my perspective. It's the opposite in my
Yeah.
perspective. I think that the constancy of these things could precede the truth, could precede.
Mhm.
Um, and so I forgot what
Yeah,
it's called.
David Patrick Carey talks about it, and he was here. I don't know if he's still here, but he said hi to you and,
Oh, hi.
said God bless to you and your
What's
family.
up, David?
So hopefully he's still here and he can tell us,
Yeah.
but yeah, he talks about that the logos spermaticos, I think
Right,
is
right,
what he calls it, yeah.
right. Yeah,
So
I
interesting.
believe that. I mean, that to me, that actually solved that problem for me, because I would often go
Mhm,
to that. When I realized I was thinking of it from a particular framework that would always punch out the same conclusion, which is like, oh, if something before something else, therefore thing after is some crappy version of it or some
mhm,
iteration. But that's not actually the case. That's not always true. That's not actually a logical follow
right.
for sure. It's like
Mhm.
it could be the other way around.
Yeah,
So that I really like that that framework and that distinction too, because it's not just naming it. It's something that you can observe in real time with other things, and these things constantly
yeah,
bubble up in different form, and you go, wow, so if we were made in God's image and we did have access, even the unknowability as a person before Christ, there's still something knowable
mhm,
of God. And so it's almost like higher resolution, like a blurry
mm,
image that's already been created, that's its pixels are getting sharper and smaller and its resolution's getting better. And the silly argument from the atheists would be like, that pixel existed before it came into focus. And you're like, that's not a good argument.
do you follow patristic faith at all? Like, Dr. Ananias's
Oh yeah, I've watched a
stuff?
bunch of his
Father
stuff, and
Deacon,
and his logic stuff.
Norwegian News, yeah.
Yeah. There's also another
Yeah,
show with like two guys. I forgot what it's called. Yeah, I've watched him.
I just love how he explains, like, philosophy, logic, and, like, ties everything in, and yeah, there's so much great content. What about any books you like or anything you wanna recommend to the audience?
Um, well, obviously, I'm someone who's vulnerable to reading intellectual, philosophical stuff, but I do recommend to myself more passages, more verses, making a reading a scripture per week, even if it's not in order. But other than that, yeah, I've been reading a book on, I forgot the name of the author, but it's called The Myth of Religious Neutrality,
Hmm,
wh- which I may not agree with his overall view, because I'm not sure what um Christian sect he's arguing from,
mhm,
but it's just generally I agree with it, because he's revealing that nobody is religiously neutral, and that we all apply the divine nature to something
mm,
at any given time. If, obviously, most, maybe most, if not all, of your audience has heard of Nihilism by Rose. That's great because it's short and condensed.
I have it right
And
here.
yeah. And C.S. Lewis, if we're talking about these topics, yeah, C.S. Lewis. And what's interesting is this is becoming harder to find unless they're just like not putting it up for sale or they're
Nihilism?
yeah, I couldn't.
Oh,
There's one week where I couldn't find it at all, but then
hmm.
maybe it was just a fluke. Um, yeah. Other than that, yeah, I've just that's pretty much it. I actually have a really dense dictionary called the New Bible Dictionary, and getting an old Bible dictionary is really cool because you could just pull up a page and get so much more detailed sort of connected history, about because language is important. Like, when I was on David Patrick's and we're talking about memetics and language and the meaning of things and how it connects to ultimate reality and why, even though a word can change over time, that keeping language pretty sharp and distinct allows us to basically understand and make sense of an intelligible world, and that assumes absolute meaning exists. And so when you look back at these words, the etymology of words actually gives you a really good sense of history, that even a paragraph of what actually happened in the particular time um, doesn't necessarily give you the full context if you don't know the meaning of words and their history, because some
Yeah.
people argue against religion based on words that maybe didn't exist. And then you're like, well, no, you have to actually confront the changing of words
Hmm.
to understand. So I do recommend any specifically etymology. So if that's just general dictionary or specifically biblical, it's fascinating to get a hold of one of these books.
What's that one called again? You just mentioned. I already forgot what you said.
The New Bible Dictionary. Douglas. Hold on. I think it's Douglas Ferdman's.
Okay.
So
Sounds
yeah,
great. I might have to buy that.
yeah. It's a little bit older, so you might have to go to like, I don't know. It's probably like eBay or one of those old like thriftier shops, online shops.
So tell us one or two of your most viral memes,
Ooh, most viral.
or I don't know, one that really stands out that maybe someone who's new to your work
Oh,
would need.
um, well, I mean, some of the ones that are shared the most would be some of the past 2 years of like the pandemic. Like one would be like, um, one that got shared a lot was like, it was about homeschooling basically. And luckily, fortunate for me, my kids have access to a pretty good classical school, and they don't have any like nonsense going on. But it was a picture of like these kids, like basically in these like tents with these multiple masks and goggles inside these little tents huddled over their desks. And I think it was the teacher saying, homeschooled kids are not socially, I forgot the
Oh,
word.
oh, they're not being socialized or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
something.
properly. They're not being
Properly
socialized.
socialized, yeah.
Yeah, that one hit pretty hard. Yeah, a lot of the memes, basically all of Savage Memes Volume 3, the current book, encapsulates the absurdity of the last 2 years pretty densely, So most of them would be about that. It would be like, I think one was like, the one viral one was about the stabby, and we'll try to call it something else.
Yeah.
And the one person saying, it was like a series of four. It was like the person who's getting it is saying, is this harmful? A series of questions that basically ends in, I don't know, I'm just doing my job.
Mm.
Can I get, you know, payment if this hurts me or something like that? It was like a whole series. Can't even remember it.
Was there one where it was like, well, at least grandma didn't die, but the
All right.
person's dead? Like,
Right, right, right. Or there was one where the person's laying, in their deathbed, and the guy's leaning over. Can we, you know, we didn't know this was going to harm you. Could we do anything for you in your last, days? And the dying person from the thing, um, whispers, "Just make sure my grandkids get it," you know?
Yeah, I know. They're, like, so ridiculous, but true. I mean,
Mhm.
these are the way a lot of people are actually thinking about these things, so
Yeah, they're following counterfeit faith,
Mhm.
authority. So it's
Yeah.
like it's I'm no longer surprised by what people do, because surprise would assume they have the same sense of what of an authority is to, in the world, and so if you just blindly follow man, your actions are consistent with faith. Your actions come from hearing, faith comes from hearing. So all you really need, and it's not an accident. This is why it's not an accident that any of these people are presented in a very priest-like, you know, persona. Like they like make it the
Mhm.
iconic way of understanding that, like that
Yeah.
thing that we need, we that humans want and desire, the priest, basically, in a lot of different forms, the access to divine, to the good, to the greater good, in material language, materialist version of it. And so when they see the Fauci guy and anyone else in their robes, basically robes, they see the light. They see,
Right.
like, oh, we'll just make the world better. It's better for the world and
Safer, will be so
safer.
much safer.
Right. Right. And that exists in different forms. I mean, I saw something really that almost occurred to me as more jarring than that cult. It was like sort of a vague Christian platform that had a lot of followers, and they did a post, and the post was like, um, praying for world peace, right? Praying for world peace. I talked to my mom about this, and that's just not something that's available. We don't get world peace in this world, and so, but it's a trick, because you believe it. You feel like, yeah, maybe there's some. Why wouldn't you, want that, you know? And so it's if it's not available, and world peace is specifically an outcome of a new world, a new beginning, and that means the world is fallen, so you can't actually heal the world and have this idea come to fruition. So you're praying for something that's not possible, in a
Mm,
way, but it feels good, right? And these are like, people might say, well, you're just, you know you're being what semantic this is semantics, and you're just being too harsh. But I don't think so. I think it's a fundamental error, in how you're expressing your faith, and what
mm,
prayer is, and what salvation is, and what the
mhm.
world is. The
Yeah.
world itself, what it is and what it's not, is a major distinction in how you operate in the world and not of it. And so that distinction is so powerful to me, that's so powerful that I see where myself will not be being that, will be of the world. We can find in places where we're being of the world.
Yeah.
And so it's just so interesting. I talked to my
Mhm.
mom about that particular thing, and she gave me a comic idea. She was like, that a lot of people might not get, but now that I've talked about it, it's like, one person's praying for world peace, but to make it more ironic, praying to Jesus for more world peace here on earth, like right now in temporal. And the other guy is like this white guy with a tank top, and he's overweight, and he's like, I'm praying to be a black backup singer. And it's like, you show the equivalent impossibilities,
Mm.
and logically, they're just incompatible
Yeah.
with what the reality is.
Father Turbo, I don't know if you know who he is. He talks a lot about how we're trying to solve spiritual problems worldly, like with worldly means, and
Totally.
it's just not gonna
Yep.
it just doesn't work, and
Yep. Yeah. Worldly, yeah, spiritual problems with carnal solutions and
Mhm.
remedies. It's just, I mean, it's the same again. It's just the that little dichotomy is just so present in so many forms of thought. So it's like worldly problem solved with the carnal, or spiritual problems solved with worldly solutions. And then, the presupposition that God does exist, but it's in the world.
Yeah.
God's in the world, and you're just mashing heaven and earth. You're just
Yeah.
like, there's heaven and earth. It's like, it's clear. No, no, they're both the same. Please, please make them the same. And it's just rampant. It's just rampant, and
Have you studied much Gnosticism? Do you
not enough. I think I the most I've studied would be listening to summaries
Church
from
of the
Jay, yeah, or
in
Jay
Church
or
of the
Church.
Eternal Logos?
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, did the audience have any questions? We're getting up to an hour. Oh, we're at an hour now. So if the audience has any questions for Jimbob, that would be awesome. And so, what are your, I don't know, what is the rest of the year look like for you? Are you just gonna, I mean, do you have any books coming out or anything going on
Um,
that you want to tell us about?
well, I had been working for 4 years at a day job as a metalsmith, and so I've only recently, in the last month, when my son was born, come back home full time. So right now, my job, my daily routine is obviously making more comics. Um, um, I still have volume 3, some of them left to get rid of, and then I'll be producing and working on probably volume 4. But in addition to that, I've been, I making more funny music and silly short music that I write, that I like to do commentary that way.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty much in a position where my audience will accept uh, a short album of funny and music that consists of songs that are only like 40 seconds long. So I'm like, some now, if I can do
Right.
more, I will. But the fact that that's possible, it makes it fun for me. So I'll work on that. But other than that, it's, I live stream every day. I talk to people. I try to cover scientism. I try to always incorporate um, Christianity and into my live stream somehow, and bring it back to that you know the battle of good and evil is not never flesh and blood. So if you're tempted to make evil a thing or a person, you're on the wrong path. So I try to remind people of that, including myself. And other than that, just doing painting. So yeah, that's just getting it out there. The best way to support what I'm doing is those
What about
various
the
things.
jewelry? Because there's a Instagram account
Yeah.
of your jewelry. Are you
Yeah, that's
selling
just
jewelry?
no, that's just up since the past. That's like years and years old. So
Okay.
no, I don't have a studio set up right now because of space and time constraints. But if I get into a bigger place, once my family as it is now starts to spill over into the current place I'm in,
Mhm.
I would love to set up a bench and do one of a kind stuff for people. But
Mhm.
that you'll have to just stay tuned for, because I would announce that, something like that.
So we have a question from Uber Noob. Is there a place where I can see Jim Bob's entire archive of memes online, or is it all in the books?
Not entirely. Unfortunately, every time I build up my archive on Instagram, I'm on my 4th account now. That happens. So Megan and I, my wife, were discussing how much to get up on my website at madebyjimbob.com, and so we might consider something like that, especially for the previous earlier 2 books, so people can see maybe the best selection of, if not the whole thing. And so yeah, I'll work on that so people can see it. But other than that, my stuff, as I mentioned in the beginning, has kind of morphed in its view and its attack mode. So that's why some of the older books, I don't feel the need to bring them back up, because you'll get like pretty basic sort of like classical liberal take in my first book.
Right.
So
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. Exposing powerful lies. Yes, please remember to like and share both channels, both of our Instagrams, and I try to put links in the description. If I'm missing any, I hope someone will let me know and I will add them. But here's one from David Patrick Harry, what is Jimbob's biggest noticeable difference in his day-to-day life since coming closer to the truth of Christ, such as relationships, patience, family, devotion, clarity of perception? Oh, good question.
Probably perception, first. I think my gift, from God, wasn't drawing, but it was, some level of discernment that I then could use with my mediums. So I think perception really increased. Relationships definitely increased in that, I value almost less relationships, but, since that personhood distinction, and specifically, you know how much how much you put into a relationship, because you have to really know the person, and that personhood is what allows people to develop compassion and forgiveness and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it's been put into more direct efforts into less relationships, actually, not more, but
Mhm.
better relationships.
Mm.
Patience, actually, I think that would be missing. I think, along with realizing, um, let's say you got really excited about the year, and you saw the possibility of abundance, and whatever, money or whatever it be, happiness. It would make sense that, along with some of those rewards, you would find yourself a lot of times in the complete absence of them, because that's your perception. So I think that goes along with this question, is that, sometimes when you get closer with your relationship with God, and your relationships with people might be lackluster. You might actually see what's wanting. What's the term? Wanting, waiting and wanting. I forgot that there's a scripture about left in the waits wanting. Like you're like something, you actually see what's missing in a lot of
Mhm.
places, because of it. And so, I think that happened in certain places too for me.
And we have one here. Please, can you make some new Beto memes? He's running for
That
governor.
guy's back. Oh man. All right. Yeah, okay. I will stop his career.
Uh, David Patrick Harry says, I'm personally terrible with patience. Well, I think we all struggle with patience.
Yeah. Wait until you
The,
have children too. Ooh.
oh, yeah. Wait till you have children, Patrick.
I start mouthing off.
Children are the best teachers, right? I've heard
Hmm.
that from
Hmm.
many, many parents.
They also
Oh,
show you who you are, because then
oh, right.
you're like, how dare you talk to me like that? And you're like, and then you just kind of sit and you go, it sounded a lot like me. Like sounded exactly like me.
Here's one, Jim Bob. I've been watching your YouTube show. I'd love a homeschool science curriculum for older kids. You're so good at observing experiments.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I go into it. Again, I'm noob. I could be wrong about a lot. It's just it seems like there's just not enough people ridiculing it, at least in my view. Again, I'm not talking about hard chemical science stuff you can manipulate. My focus is mostly on astronomy and cosmology and what's assumed. And I
Mm,
find it fascinating. Actually, this is something I would love to do with David Patrick Harry, maybe in the future, is look into the mysticism, Kabbalism in particular, and look at the trends of cosmology and how it's just accidentally fulfilling the the traditions or worldviews and assumptions of these other mystical views, and how it's interesting that astrophysics and cosmology in general are kind of relaying this kind of stuff. It's not
mm,
totally absent of a religion in my view, but they conceal it pretty well, and they present it like it's totally, yeah, we're just talking about just normal things here. But I think you, David, in particular, we would be able to look at some of this stuff and go, oh, I see where they're kind of sneaking in this symbol
mm,
or this kind of way of viewing the world, and the heavens and stuff. Doesn't help that all of NASA, I mean, talk about the beginnings. It's like I talk often about Jack Parsons. I mean, the guy literally was a dedicated favorite student of Aleister Crowley.
right. Wow. Yeah. And I know you probably have to leave, but all of a sudden
Okay.
we have all these really great questions.
It's
Are
okay.
you okay for a
Yeah.
few more minutes?
Mhm.
Okay. Jim Bob, is there a name for the first woman boxer comic you did? The one with the buff guy with pigtails? I can't find it.
I think it was Mary. I think I called him Mary, but this is back when. I did one comic, I think in volume 1, where it's like the guy going, "Let's get ready to rumble," and, like, he introduces the woman, and then he introduces Mary, and she's just like, and that got deleted pretty quickly. But a
Mm,
recent one I did is just a dude in pigtails who's clearly a dude, and he's got a giant belt and it says Women's Boxing Championship, and he's, like, celebrating.
I
I
saw
just
that
call him
one.
Mary because it's so gentle. Mary is very gentle, and it's the you gotta create contrast.
Okay, this will be the last question. This might be a kind of a detailed answer. Hopefully it is anyway. Question: what is your general thought process for developing savage memes? They are awesome.
Oh, thank you. It's actually a short answer. It
Oh,
used to be that I had to actually think and how to best put it into a format. Now, and this goes out to anyone who wants to be a satirical cartoonist or whatever, a writer. All you have to do to be a good satirist is just report reality accurately. That's it. Like now,
mhm.
because reality is so absurd now that all you have to do is be an honest journalist in cartoon form or whatever. And so the answer is all I'm doing now is looking out and going, draw what you see, and to large part, say what's being said. Maybe shorten the letters so it fits on the page, but I'm really just relaying at this point what's occurring outside there, out in the world.
Yeah, and I love the stylized nature of your art. I mean, it doesn't have to be super detailed with all this stuff going on in the background and a million people and windows and cars, and
Mhm.
it's just so direct, and
Yeah.
that's what we love.
Yeah, I like that too, that's the case. I mean,
Mhm.
it almost occurs as like if you ask someone to imagine a character in their head, that would be probably the most detailed they could get, is my characters are just like it's like there, but it's white in the background and it's almost fleeting.
All right. Well, God bless you, Jim Bob. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And I guess you have a newborn. You said
Mhm.
just last month your
Yeah, about
youngest
three
was
and a
born.
half weeks. Yeah,
Oh my
my
gosh.
son, my first son. So I have two older girls, 5 and 3, almost 6 and 4, actually, and then baby James, who's named after me. My real name's James.
Oh, well, congratulations to you and your wife
Thank
and
you.
daughters. And this has been so much fun. Thank you. Thank you for being my co host today. And to my audience, thank you guys so much for your questions and liking, sharing, supporting both of us. Go follow Jim Bob. Go, if he ever gets kicked off Instagram again, you
5.
can, yeah, you'll just
Look for 5.
and also just remember his website is really easy to remember.
Yeah, made by mhm. Yep.
Madebyjimbob.com. And so you can find all of his links and things there. And to my moderators, thank you guys. As usual, you're always in the chat holding everything down. Thank you. Thank you. And I have another live stream hopefully Thursday. I have Mia coming back. You guys know Mia from my show. She's been on 4 times and she is so busy on Instagram right now writing beautiful, beautiful posts about New Age to Christianity and Orthodoxy. I think she and I are going to be baptized at the same time, which is super exciting for us. We're crossing our fingers that that's going to happen. But, anyways, come back on Thursday. It'll be around 11 PST. And thanks again, Jim Bob. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks a lot. See you
Okay.
guys.
Bye, everybody.